everyone, this is Jacqui Cooper with JCooperTravels, Crypto Mom to Love Travel Scotland. As everyone can see from the backdrop, all my shows this year are being shared so that way you can enjoy and hop on and subscribe so you can hear everyone that I'm talking to around the world about a variety of topics. Today, I have a special guest on who is overseas and in a country that I love. And we're going to be talking about that in just a second. Before I get there, I just, for those that are new to my story and my journey, I am located in the United States, and I am an attorney. I'm also a special education teacher, and I'm also a serial entrepreneur. I am a certified travel consultant as well as a consultant on a variety of areas. And so when you do travel, if you are looking at enjoying the retreats that we're going to be talking about today or any other travel around the world, definitely connect with me because I have access to travel insurance. And I think it's something that everyone needs to be thinking about, but that'll be a topic for another day. The other thing that I want to share with everyone about is I also do blogging, and you're going to see the Happ-Y-Ness Factor News, which is on the other side of my shoulder. And our conversation today will also be featured in that because it's all about mind, body, and spirit, and how do we find balance and the passion that we have in life, and how do we carry that forward so we can have a more enjoyable journey. So with that being said, I want to thank Robert for hopping on. I have connected with Robert on a variety of social media platforms. So when I share this out on Twitter or Facebook or LinkedIn, definitely please like and subscribe, and also follow him so that way you can see more about his journeys. He has a very special story, and he's, what impressed me when I first talked to him is he made a lot of life choices and that were driven by different personal experiences, but now he's helping others. And so I'm going to stop talking and I'm going to let Robert share more about his story. Robert, how are you doing today?
I'm doing really well, Jackie. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I'm really excited to have our conversation. I know when we first spoke, we have a lot of common interests, and we definitely have a lot of common beliefs in terms of being able to be of service to others and helping everyone find their own personal life journey and path. Why don't you tell a little bit more about your story and how you came to be in the beautiful location that you're in right now?
Sure. It's a very interesting story because it really does start in childhood, and I really was able to learn a lot of life skills because I grew up with an abusive alcoholic dad.
Hmm.
So that, in a way, thanking my grandmother for her input during that period of time taught me that there was choice involved. And it sounds really, of course, as a kid, I couldn't define things that way. But I knew that what I was seeing was an example of what I didn't want to be. And I knew that if I set things in motion, if I took action, which is why my brand is called Possibility in Action, that would lead me to a new reality. And so that was something that I grew up with. And I was lucky enough to meet the most amazing young woman. Her first day of college. I was a junior. She was a sophomore. She was 17. I was 19, and we just immediately fell in love. We had a really dynamic relationship, actually. The nice thing about meeting somebody so young is you grow up together
Yeah,
and you don't bring a lot of baggage to a certain extent. So we
yeah.
grew up together, we became a team. And then at basically the height of our everything, she was doing an MD PhD at Mount Sinai Hospital. I had just finished my MBA from Columbia, and I was recruited by the Abu Dhabi Investment Authority in the United Arab Emirates. And as soon as I took the job, she was diagnosed with late stage breast cancer right before her 31st birthday. And that shifted everything. But honestly, to tell you the truth, the story I tell, because the story I lived, was as a team, and let's say, with transparency in terms of life expectations,
Hmm.
because she didn't want to know anything about her disease, but we talked about what was quality of life.
Right.
And we said, you know what? Cancer is not the dominant color in the painting of our life.
Right.
Cancer will be an accent color to highlight joy.
Hmm.
And so, in those 11 years that she was journeying towards the end of her life, we really lived in a state of joy. We learned about the present moment. We learned about surrender. There were so many lessons that we learned that when she passed away and I went back to my finance job, because, like you, I sort of can wear many hats, right? But for me as a child, money was going to save me. Money was my way out.
Yeah,
So I
exactly.
became, I became an investment banker.
Right.
And after she passed away and I went back to that, it just wasn't there. I
Yeah.
never had the passion for it.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
was something that came from anger to get money, to get away, to have freedom.
It was a
And
tool. It was a
it's a
tool.
tool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly. It was a
Yeah.
tool. But with Desiree, my wife's name was Desiree. With Desiree, what we learned together in terms of the present moment and everything else is I came up with my understanding of purpose.
Mm.
And for me, it was when passion comes in alignment with your values and
Yeah.
you want to give the results away. It's not you
Right.
want a gold star or a pat on the back.
Yeah.
And I carried the information about her disease. I left my job not to be her caregiver, but because she was self-sufficient. But I actually became her support system because I wanted her to reach her goals. And she
Yeah.
actually became the founding director of palliative care at New York Hospital while having metastatic breast cancer.
Hmm.
And she left her mark for sure. So when I looked at that, I asked myself, because one of the things when we're going through grief, we have to realize we have to grieve who we were.
Yeah.
And I looked at, well, who was I? My expectations for life were completely destroyed. Everything I expected to have in life was gone. And I said, well, the thing I really enjoyed that I miss, of course, I miss her. I miss her every day, but um, I missed helping her achieve her dreams. And I'm like, well, that's a life coach. And so I looked around and I said, okay, well, if I'm starting all over, what's the most amazing story I could look back on my deathbed, from my deathbed? And that was to leave everything, move to Italy. So that's my beautiful location,
Yeah, exactly.
become a life coach. And I moved here without speaking the language, without having a job, without having a home, without knowing anybody. And yes, ex-investment banker, I can tell you right now, an 11-year journey with breast cancer, metastatic breast cancer is not cheap. And so I had no money. She didn't have life insurance. And so I was teaching English for $8 an hour just to pay the bills and until I became a life coach. And funny enough, my journey to get my documents for citizenship led me to the town that my great grandfather came from. And I actually live 2 homes from where he grew up.
Wow.
And
It's a full circle type of story.
yes,
So before we continue on what you're doing now, um, was it, because many people, are going to be thinking this, well, it's scary to take that jump. And what happens if you, leave your current job? You don't know what's going to happen next. And can I make it? All those questions, that kind of go through the mind. So were you just so, uh was the door closed so much in your mind that you knew that you had to go this route, or was there any doubts or questions that you had when you stepped over from the United States over to Italy? What pushed you? Because I know there have been different times in my own life where I've gotten to the point where I know, okay, enough's enough. I've got to close that door because it's just not positive, and I've got to go a different direction. Or sometimes there've been things like, well, I could do this. There are choices, there are options. What do I really want to do? Again, where were you in that? Because that's a pretty big jump, even though I know that you also had, major life events that were kind of propelling you in different areas. But how did you make your decision? How were you feeling?
That's such a great question. So there was definitely, let's say, anxiety,
Yeah,
discomfort,
yeah,
worries about making the change.
right,
I did, let's say, think about scenarios. I'm like, well, would I rather the fear stop me from doing it, or would I rather do it, fail, and look back on the attempt? And so what I did is I actually weighed the two and thought, okay, so the worst case scenario is I'm, going to be a 50 at that time. It was almost 50, well, 45, living with my mom if it doesn't
right,
work out,
right,
and figure
right.
something else out. Because of the journey with Desiree, I really embraced impermanence. And it's something I reflect upon every day that
Want to
there
define
is.
what that is for someone who
Sure.
might not know?
So basically, impermanence is the phrase, this too shall pass, but that means everything.
Mm,
That means that this stay, our life, for as hard as it is to hear sometimes, is we all have a terminal disease because we all have to leave at one point in time.
yeah,
And that's not under our control as much as we want it to be under our control by eating well and so forth. So when I looked at all of that, I really asked myself the question more, what is more important to me? The safety, because I could have had a great life.
yeah,
I could have lived in a five-star hotel in Dubai. I did meet, Paris Hilton, and it was a crazy situation when I went back to Dubai. Um, but I felt stagnant.
right.
And so to me, when I clarified my values and I clarified the story that I wanted to look back on, I realized growth was very important to me. Adventure was very important to me. Curiosity was very important to me. And I said, you know what? I might wind up living in a studio apartment somewhere and like living off of hot dogs and bagels. Well, okay, not in Italy, but pasta and
Yeah,
pizza.
yeah.
But is that a sacrifice or is that an investment?
Hmm.
Because I'm following something that's empowering me. I want to be the adventurer in my life. And that was the shifting factor there. That there was too much, in a way, there was too much discomfort
Hmm.
in the safety.
We all get, I think we all fall back on that safety blanket that we have around us. And that blanket might not really be safe at all because, again, we have certain things in place that we accept. So we kind of assume that it's safe, but it's just things that we've gotten used to. And then stepping out, like you said, it creates discomfort because there's the unknown of what you are not sure is going to happen. But also that's the excitement, that's the adventure of life that, that's why I think people travel because they want to experience new things, but they do it when they take a travel trip, they can do it in a safe way. You just kind of pulled up roots and did it in a major life way. But, again, um, whether it's physical travel or life travel, like we're talking about, in terms of career and family paths, I think we all have to make these decisions, because if you're not happy, again, going back to the Happiness Factor newsletter, if you're not happy, then that's going to end up being toxic in so many ways in your life that is going to contribute towards disease, ill health, and other things, even though these are not easy choices in the least.
100% they're not easy. And, you know, yes, I did pick up and let's say leave everything.
Yeah.
The real shift in terms of changing life is leaving your old mindset.
Yes.
It's definitely not the place, right?
Yes.
But one of the things, and because of the journey with my wife, and because of a lot of other things that I started experiencing, and I think travel is an amazing tool because I spent a lot of time in India. She and I spent a lot of time in India, really broadening our perspective. But at the end of the day, the moment when the moment comes that you know time is running out, the question is, did you use the time the way you wanted to, or
Yeah.
did you just play it safe? And for
Yeah.
me, it was, again, the idea of what real security is there. I mean,
Yeah.
the pandemic is a perfect example, right? Nobody could have expected it. There was lots of mental health issues. There
Yeah.
was suicide. There were many unfortunate things that happened besides just the pandemic, but the ripple effect.
Yeah.
So the idea of safety is somewhat an illusion. And I also do believe I spent a lot of time learning about intentional living and living an essential life, not a minimalist life. And so once you understand what's important to you, I was in a way blessed to not have children, so it was a little easier. But I've worked with clients that have had children and made dynamic changes because it's an example they want to give their children.
Yeah.
So the fear, in a way, is mitigated by the fact that, you know what? I want my children to understand that they should take risk and they should dream big. And that's what this is all about. At the end of my life, looking back as the adventurer, and was there anything right or wrong? In a way, we will never know.
Mm.
Like there may be a, let's say, quote, failure, but over time, that it's like the sliding doors movie, right? You don't know where it's going to bring you,
Yeah.
but because our life ends, we will always be unfinished to a certain
Yeah.
extent.
Yeah.
So it's the craft person.
Yeah, I guess there are a few things, and we're going to hop over to
Sure.
your platform in a quick second that I want to mention for those that are listening. Um, as much as you and I, appreciate adventure and everything, sometimes people are not able to make those choices. They are, and I'll say this in a loving way for those that are listening. You're stuck in the position because you maybe don't have you're not able to create some options because of different things that are going on. So in your current life position, you might not be able to make a change. So when that happens, you still have to, and I've, I'm thinking about different things within my own life. You still have to figure out, okay, how do you make a transition in your mind so you can still be happy, or you can find that purpose within the space that you're in because of the life circumstances that you have. Sometimes you can't make a drastic choice or a drastic change. You have to kind of be in that moment and kind of work within the framework that you've been given, even though later you might be able to make a change. So for those that are listening, I don't want you to think that we're asking that all of you kind of just drop everything, go to Italy, make a major life change. But, in everyone's life, you can kind of do a shift. And in that shift, it can help with perspectives, with just energy and that type of thing. And that sort of brings me to what we're going to be talking about now, are the retreats that you have.
Sure.
And for those that are listening, I'm going to definitely embed within the talk show the link so you can actually connect with Robert. So if you are driving and we say the website's name, again, don't have paper and pen, just come back to this episode. But Robert, do you want to explain a little bit more of, now that you're in Italy, now you're living, 2 doors away from where, your family was. What happened next?
Sure. So one thing I want to quickly circle back, because that was a great call
Yeah.
out on your point. So that's why I had mentioned mindset in a way. Like I've worked with a lot of caregivers because of my experience and who Desiree was and so forth.
Yeah.
And that's a situation where you can't drastically change something. And the whole idea is it's not the drastic change. It's always that mindset shift. And so it's getting comfortable with trying to shift your focus from feeling stuck
Yeah.
to understanding where choices and possibilities lie, and all of that other stuff. That's part of what the whole retreat is about, actually. Because when I moved to Italy, I was rebuilding a life. I had to find myself because I was no longer, this amazing woman's husband and support system and all of that. and I wasn't the investment banker either, So when I came here, the thing that I noticed is like looking at the Colosseum. The Colosseum stimulated a thought process I wouldn't have had in my normal setting. I remember walking into a church and just really focusing on a mosaic.
Mhm.
And if you really look at an ancient mosaic, it's gorgeous.
Yeah,
But each individual piece was cut by hand. So each piece is imperfect, but
yeah,
it's the imperfections that create the beauty.
yeah,
And so that's the depth of our life, these quote imperfections, which I don't believe imperfections exist. It's all part of our internal mosaic. So when I started looking at all this stuff, I started thinking, wow, you know, you can study, and I say this in my books as well. The ancient philosophers did not say, read 1,000 self-help books and listen to all these podcasts and, get this app. They said, no, find something that resonates with you and put it into action. It has to be experiential. It can't be studied. So the retreats were based on me having been in these locations and being touched by them because of the symbolism. And that's what this current retreat, which is the only retreat I'm running at the moment, because I really want to craft these where the location is the stimulus. Of course, we have conversations and so forth about life events, but just, I see you pulled up the page. So if you just look at day 2, which says Holy Grail, that is a castle in Puglia where supposedly the Holy Grail was housed. So you go there, we have a conversation of what is your Holy Grail, which is basically what is your value, what are your values, what is your purpose, and so are you treating it as something so precious that you need a castle, and how important and how are you living it? And so you go there, you see this, you talk about it, you sit underneath the shadow of the castle and have this conversation. It's not something you necessarily will forget.
yeah. And it's also maybe not something that you will have an answer to right away, because there's so many things that we have to kind of sift through and acknowledge and accept. Or, sometimes we put up barriers to what we don't want to face or what we do want to face. And those quote unquote truths are hard sometimes when we are rediscovering who we are and who we're with, or who we want to be with. So there are, or what we want to do. So there's a lot of different factors that kind of are in our life that we kind of have to sift through. So there might not be a fast answer.
And that actually is even better, to tell you the truth, for this type of retreat,
Yeah,
because like you said before, the shift, you use the word shift.
yeah,
This is all about shifting your perspective.
yeah, exactly.
Interestingly, the last retreat I just ran, it's only open to 8 people, but 5 of the 8 asked for a part 2. They're like, wow, my perspective has shifted so much. I'd like to come back and work again for a week. And they all wanted to do it as a group because they really bonded, right? Because you're all going through this together. And of course, there are tools that I give to help someone sort of hone that down. But the awareness of, well, you know what? I really don't know. And if I don't know, then am I really living a life that's in harmony with who I am?
Right.
That's that one shift that says, oh, wait a minute, I don't want to waste this time that I've been given. And so that's an example of like the conversation we would have. If you go down, and just because I love this
Yeah,
one location, I think it's day 5.
yeah.
Yeah. So that day 5, we actually go to the battleground
Mhm.
where Hannibal won over the Roman army, with basically not even a quarter of the same force that the
Mhm.
Roman army had. And we have a discussion about many different topics at this location, but one of them is also, how do you actually approach life?
Yeah,
Does it feel like a battle? And if it does feel like a battle, what's happening? You're looking at life through obligation instead of opportunity.
yeah,
And what do you need to do to shift that? because the last thing you want to do is get through life.
Yeah.
And that's part of that conversation there as well. So having had these types of experiences, I remember going to the Coliseum and just sitting underneath the Coliseum many a day, to tell you the truth, because I lived in Rome for the first couple of years while I was getting my coaching degree, and I was teaching English. And I remember sitting there and all the different things that would go through my mind. Yeah, there was the sacrificing and so forth, but yet there were also these people showing up, with grit and resolve. And there was hope to a certain extent for the people that would win. And, you know, it really does shift that perspective of our habitual thinking. And
Mhm.
that's that shift you're talking about. If you shift just a little bit from habitual to intentional, all of a sudden you start to see many more things.
Yeah.
The, the great thing about this life is, and sometimes people don't resonate with this because they don't see it around them, but there are possibilities all around us.
All the way.
100%.
And that's why I'm a serial entrepreneur. It's like there's, whatever path in life I'm experiencing right now, I see potential there. But that is a mindset that has taken years to develop. And
Oh,
and
yeah.
and many of us, when we are younger, we're not exposed to that mindset. We're not taught how to have that mindset. And 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 again, for those that are listening, there's nothing wrong with the mindset you have currently, but if you're not happy, if it doesn't feel right, then you're being propelled to look for a different direction, and just be open to what Robert's saying or what I'm talking about, because again, that small shift can maybe bring a little bit more joy to your life for the steps of the path that you're going to be taking. So,
Beautifully said. And if but that's what's so beautiful about this, right? Like, um as you mentioned, in a way underlying that is just being somewhat curious.
yeah,
But the idea that's why possibility could almost be a double-edged sword, right? Because if you see it and don't act on it, it could wind up being a regret.
yes,
So there's what will come from it, number one. But the second thing as well is that it's that small shift to start saying, okay, there are, let's say, less linear paths
yeah,
to something that interests me. Because like you said, we grow up as children, we grow up with a very linear path. Maybe not the children today, which is great that there seems to be more flexibility. But especially when I grew up, it was X, Y, Z.
yep, yep.
1, 2, 3. This is what your life is going to look like. And what taught me about possibility and taking chance and everything else is really this idea of impermanence. Because if it's all going to end, and I don't know when, and yes, there is fear of healthcare and old age and retirement and everything else, but if it is all going to end, am I making the most of the time I have here?
I agree. I totally agree. For everyone, Robert and I are going to have many conversations because we have a very similar philosophy, and these type of conversations really can't be condensed into a short podcast. These are lifelong conversations, and these are conversations that's why these type of retreats allow for the philosophical discussion of where do we want to go, who do we want to be, how do we live with what we have currently and be happy with that, or decide to make changes. Again, you talk about regrets. Again, it's a very difficult concept of not living a life with regrets, because sometimes we can't make some changes. So accepting that is also really important. But for everyone who is looking at, trying to explore change, definitely, Robert, why don't you mention your website, even though I am going to have it embedded within. How would they reach you?
Sure. The best way really is just to it is my name. So it's
Yeah.
Robert Pardi, PARDI.com.
It's very simple, everyone. So that way you can reach out, you can enjoy the retreats that he is offering. And, again, it's all part of our journey. So, at least be open to asking the questions. Sometimes when we ask the questions, we don't like the answers we hear, but at least, knowing the answers kind of helps us with the acceptance sometimes. So, Robert, any last minute thoughts before we wind down? Because again, I know you and I can have more than one conversation, and we will for sure.
I'm really looking forward to that. So one thing I will just follow up on, because I think it was so great how you talked about, again, sometimes you can't change your situation and so forth. That doesn't necessarily have to lead to a regret.
Yes.
When you become active in it, and there's the acceptance, and there's how you want to show up in it, and it doesn't feel like it's happening to you, you can then walk away from that idea of regrets, because the closer you get to making choices consciously and living, getting in touch with who you are, your values, and all that other
Yeah.
stuff, when you bring that into the present moment, which really, that's a whole nother conversation we could have, that's pretty much
We
where we
will.
live, right? That's
Yeah.
all that really exists.
We'll do that.
Yeah, all of a sudden, that regret actually can decrease because you become powerful in that moment.
I agree totally. And everyone, Robert, thank you so much for this conversation. I love it. Everyone, remember what I always say at the end of all my conversations: be kind to yourself, be kind to others. We are all part of one world, and we're also interconnected. So everyone, thank you so much. And we will talk soon. Have a great day.